legend continues, but no one sees it.
Chief Brody!
The legend continues, but no one believes it.
That's a shark. And I know what a shark looks like because I've seen one up close. And you better do something about this one because I don't intend to go through that hell again.
The legend continues.
Harry!
The all-new Jaws 2.
Hey there, welcome back to another video. This time around, it is my review of the 1978 sequel, Jaws 2. Now, Jaws 2 is one of those films that over the years has started to gain quite the cult following. And as a result, it's gotten more admiration and appreciation. And I can see why. I think Jaws 2 is a relatively enjoyable, solid sequel. No, it's not on the same level of quality as Jaws, but very few films are, because Jaws is a masterpiece. That being said, I don't think Jaws 2 is that many steps down from the first movie, especially when you compare it to the other sequels in the franchise and other killer shark movies. I would say this is arguably the best sequel in the series, and definitely one of the better killer shark movies, because it has some pretty high production values. The script is relatively decent. The performances, for the most part, at least from the main cast, are pretty high tier. And there are other elements of the film that work quite well. Now, just like its predecessor, though, Jaws 2 dealt with a hellacious and troubled production. The studio wanted to bring back Steven Spielberg to direct, but he understandably declined because he did not want to deal with such a hellacious and troubled production all over again. So they had to find another director. They settled upon John D. Hancock, who is a guy who directed Let's Scare Jessica to Death for Paramount, as well as a couple other dramas. And he shot about a month's worth of footage, if not a little more than that. And the studio and the producers were not enamored with it at all. They didn't like his tone, they didn't like what he was doing, so they let him go. That led to them trying to hire Joe Alves, who was a production designer, who would go on to direct Jaws 3, to direct Jaws 2, but he couldn't do it because the Hollywood Guild he was a part of was not going to allow him to direct a movie that he was also the production designer for. So they had to scramble and find a last-minute replacement, and they settled upon Jeannot Szwarc. And Jeannot had directed a film called Bug in 1975, which was squashed by Jaws in the box office. And as a last-minute replacement, I think he did a remarkable job directing this film, because he dealt with so much bullshit when it comes to this production. He dealt with a shark that didn't work consistently and was frustrating to work with as a result, because you would have probably hours of shooting that's completely wasted because the shark was not working and was so temperamental and so unpredictable when it comes to when it would work. Then, if that isn't bad enough, he had to deal with a disgruntled cast. Instead of it being a drunken fool who's just being a total asshole on the set, like Robert Shaw in Jaws, this time around he had to deal with the film's star, the film's centerpiece, and Roy Scheider constantly at his throat throughout the entire production. They were arguing incessantly, non-stop, back and forth. A lot of it was stemming from Roy's side, who sadly was, I don't know what he was doing. It seems like he was just walking all over poor Jeannot. And this led to a confrontation that got physical at one point. The two got into blows with one another, and they had to be broken up by the crew. So you've got that going on, and then on top of Roy Scheider being difficult to work with, he also had Lorraine Gary, who was bitching and moaning about her part in the film, and was not happy with the screenplay, so I had to deal with that. And then if that isn't bad enough, he's got a cast of teenagers. So he's got to deal with rowdy teens who probably aren't always ready for their takes, and always not necessarily taking things seriously enough. So he has to deal with all of those factors. And despite all of this bullshit, he navigated the rough waters rather well. And there was never a moment when it comes to his direction where he cracked, or where you could see the seams, where you could see things start to tear apart when it comes to his direction. He was still solid as a rock, and I think all of these factors combined make this arguably his best film when it comes to his directing, because of all of these things that he had to deal with. And that wasn't all, because he also had to handle a studio and producers that were breathing down his neck, and a studio that had no faith in him. He wasn't their first choice, so he had to deal with that as well. So when you add that all up, Jeannot Szwarc deserves way more credit for the film looking as good as it does, and for the film turning out as well as it does, considering the circumstances. And from a visual standpoint, he did a wonderful job. I like this film in terms of its directing. I think it's very dynamic. It's full of a good amount of energy and life. The sequences that are supposed to be suspenseful or tense appear tense, and definitely have a fair amount of thrills to them and chills. And then the sequences are supposed to be more majestic, more lighthearted, or more serious or more dramatic. They also are equally effective, because Jeannot Szwarc is a good director. I don't think he is nearly as bad or nearly as average as a lot of his critics have made him out to be. I've always felt he's been a little bit of an underrated director, because I thought his direction in Bug was really good. I thought he did a good job with Jaws 2. I thought he did a good job with Somewhere in Time and Supergirl. So I've never really bought into the fact that he was just a schlocky director who did nothing but useless schlock. I 100% disagree with that. And when it comes to the more difficult shots in this film, I thought he pulled them off brilliantly. The underwater opening sequences with the divers who discover the wreck of the Orca and get attacked by a new shark. The water skiing sequence, which was one of the first scenes that he shot for this film. The sequences involving the teenagers who were stranded adrift with the killer shark. The spectacle moments, like the speedboat blowing up, or the electrocution of the shark at the end, or the shark eating a fucking helicopter, which is an insane moment. Overall, I did come away pretty impressed with Jeannot Szwarc's direction. I thought he did a really nice job with this film, and he deserves a hell of a lot more credit. The screenplay by Carl Gottlieb and Howard Sackler, it's decent enough. It's got its strong points. I like the way that they handle Brody's paranoia, and the fact that he doesn't trust himself, and he's more impulsive when it comes to this second shark attack, and how he's going about trying to stop it. I like the teenagers for the most part. I think they have a good relationship with one another. I like the whole final series of events that involve the teenagers. Uh, I really like the last half of the film that focuses on the teenagers where they're stranded with a killer shark. I think in a lot of ways it's a prototypical slasher because you have a group of teenagers and they are alone and they have to fend off and survive a killer. But this time around, it's not a human killer with a chainsaw or a machete or a knife. It's a shark. Uh, and speaking of the shark, I love the way the script writes this shark. This shark is the fucking Terminator. It will not stop ever until you are dead. Like, this shark is relentless, much like the shark in the first movie, but in a way where it seems like the shark is always watching. The shark is always there in the background. Where in the first film, it felt like the shark was not always present because they were focusing on other things. And Jaws 2, it feels like the shark is always there. It's always in the background, like some presence. And the film showed more of the shark, and I didn't mind that because I felt that that was a nice contrast to Jaws. If they just tried to do the Hitchcockian stuff again, that would have been a little bit too much deja vu. So I appreciate the fact that they weren't trying to do the same when it comes to that regard. Also, I really find the shark attack scenes to be equally as fearsome, equally as brutal as the first film, despite the fact that they're not necessarily as bloody. And this one isn't necessarily as gory, but I still feel that they had the same intensity. Uh, and I just really love the opening and the way they set things up with the underwater photographers. And that really sets things up well when it comes to the shark being this consistent presence throughout the film. And the shark also looks very unique. I like the idea of having the shark get blown up early in the movie and then have the shark be scarred for the rest of the film. It makes it look more fearsome. It makes the shark look more unique. Kind of reminds you of Freddy Krueger. Like, what if Freddy Krueger possessed a shark? Like, this would probably be close to the results of that endeavor. Now, all of that being said, the script is not really anything more than decent because of the fact that there's a lot of moments here, especially early on, where it suffers from sequelitis, where it's trying to have too many callbacks or references to the first film with characters, with similar dynamics, with similar plot points, and they don't really add that much new into the fray in order to make these similar plot points feel fresh. So as a result, the first half of the film in particular feels pretty stale and takes a little too long to get going. Other than a few spurts here and there, like the water skiing sequence or the shark attacks when they are there, or the moments where Brody is dealing with paranoia. But other than that stuff, when it's focusing on Brody and his wife's relationship, it's not really as strong. When you have moments with Brody and the mayor is once again reluctant to trust Brody, and the townspeople and the politicians, they don't want to trust Brody, so you're doing the same thing again, where Brody is trying to tell them that there's a shark, and they're not listening to him, and the only thing that they add that makes things seem like they're different is the whole paranoia element. But if you take that out, it's just a watered down, weaker version of the dynamic between Brody, the mayor, and the town. from the first film. And they have other characters that are brought in to the fold where they try to have more screen time for Hendrix, for instance. I don't think that works that well because I don't think Hendrix is that strong of a character. And then you have a focus from time to time on Mike Brody, and that doesn't work. That's not something that I feel is that effective because Mike Brody is a unlikable, bratty prick in this film. The script did a terrible job making this character likable. So anytime that it focuses on this character, the film drowns because you don't like this character and you don't give a shit when it comes to him becoming shark food. In fact, you wish he was shark food so you wouldn't have to be exposed to this asshole bratty teen anymore. So, yeah, the script, it's not great, but it's decent. It's adequate enough. It's got things that do really excel, but there's a lot of elements to it that don't really work and definitely do hurt the film. And then you have the cast, which I think for the most part is really good. Roy Scheider, I thought he did a great job playing Brody yet again. This seemed like a different performance because there were moments where he was showing even more vulnerability, where he lost his job, where he was questioning his own sanity when it comes to the shark and how he's reacting to the attack the second time around. And he was once again a badass because he had the finale where he gets the shark to eat the electrical cable. And I just felt that Roy Scheider was a very strong presence in this film, and he was very integral to Jaws 2's success overall. And because he's a consummate professional, despite some moments where he was not being professional at all when it comes to how he was handling himself on the set of Jaws 2, that never bled into his performance. His performance in Jaws 2 was still really solid, still really good, and it was a lot of fun to see Roy Scheider play the role he was born to play yet again as Chief Brody. Lorraine Gary, she was fine as Ellen. She just didn't have a lot to work with this time around. Same goes for Murray Hamilton. I didn't feel that his character was nearly as memorable, nearly as strong. I honestly wish that he wasn't even in the movie, or if he was, it was just a little cameo instead of trying to recreate the same dynamic between him and Brody, because it just doesn't work this time around. It's very watered down and weak. They tried to make up for it with a different villain character in Len Peterson, but that isn't very effective because I don't think Joseph Mascolo was really that impressive. It was a very forgettable performance. Jeffrey Kramer, he returns as Jeff Hendricks. I know he's a fan favorite, but I never really got into this character, and I never really got into this performance. This is a goofy comic relief kind of role, and to me, he wasn't funny, so he was just goofy and annoying. I wish that there were less of a focus on this character and more scenes with Martin Brody or more scenes with the teenagers. Collin Wilcox, she has a bit role as Dr. Elkins. I liked her performance. I honestly wish she was in it more. I understand why they didn't do that because she's the marine biologist and they didn't want to have too much of a Hooper dynamic going on. But I feel that there would have been enough differences there where it could have worked because she has a different personality than Richard Dreyfuss. And I really liked the scene that she was in. I wish she was in it more. I think that would have helped the movie to have her tag along with Brody in the end. And Dusenberry, I thought she was terrific as Tina Wilcox. She did a nice job playing the bubbly teen part, but she did an equally as good job portraying the traumatic teen, because this is a very nuanced performance, and I feel she deserves way more credit than she gets from people, because I thought she did a remarkable job playing this character, when it comes to making her very charismatic and bubbly and likable. And then when she sees her boyfriend get horrifically eaten by the shark, she has a very real and raw reaction to that. And I felt the performance just went to another level as a result because of how believable her trauma was. And a lot of times in these kind of films, you don't see that aspect. You don't see the believable trauma, the aftermath. And I felt that that helped the movie feel grounded in some semblance of reality. And I really just thought that her performance was top notch. And the complete opposite of the spectrum is Marc Gruner as Mike. This is a grueling performance to sit through because this actor fucking sucks. There's a reason why this guy never acted again after Jaws 2. Because he's fucking awful. He was as wooden as an oar, and this is just a pathetic performance, just monotone, one note. It didn't help either that the character was written in a way where he was unlikable. So then you have a actor who's playing this character who can't act, that makes things even more insufferable. This is the kind of actor who's so abysmal that he could not act his way out of a paper bag if you gave him directions. He was that fucking bad in this. I don't know why he got the role. He had no talent to speak of. And it's one of those things where okay, were they looking for a certain look? Is that why he got the role? If that's the case, they had another actor on the cast who had a similar look, and David Elliott, who played the mayor's son. Just swap the roles. Have David Elliott play Mike, and have Marc Gruner play the mayor's son. Or if you want to go in a different direction, have Keith Gordon play Brody. Have him play Mike Brody. But instead, they got this guy who just sucks the life out of the film and every scene that he's in because he's a fucking robot. And you can't tell the difference between unconscious Mike Brody and conscious Mike Brody as a result. Because the guy is so fucking bad at showing any kind of life or energy to his performance. He might as well have been knocked out for the entire movie. The rest of the cast is okay. Barry Coe is Tom Andrews. Gary Springer is Andy. Not the best performance in the world, but I liked the performance because the character was fun. And I felt that he had some nice chemistry with the other teenagers. Donna Wilkes plays Jackie Peters. There was one character in this, one actress, who just spent like the last half of the movie screaming her head off, and that got really annoying. But I'm not going to hold it against her because she was just doing what she was asked to do. You've got Keith Gordon as Doug, this nerdy character. I liked his performance. You could see that this is an actor that really had a lot of potential, and you could see why he would go on to do other films like Christine after this and do some really good work. And the rest of the cast is just kind of there. But the main cast members, they do a solid job here. Mainly it's Brody. It's Roy Scheider, who's the focus of the film. And he's the one that is given the most screen time. And he's the one that delivers the finest performance. And he really does hold things together. And then you have a score by John Williams, who comes back and composes the original score for the film. And I think this is honestly one of his most underrated scores. I think it's right up there with his score for Dracula. I think it's a great score. It's very majestic, very adventurous, but also very tense and suspenseful when it needs to be. And it doesn't feel like it's just a lazy carbon copy of his work from Jaws, where he easily could have done that. And he chose to go into the opposite direction and create a completely original score for the most part that has some aspects of his Jaws theme here and there, but other than those parts, it feels like a completely original creation. And I felt that the film featured some really nice looking cinematography by Michael Butler, especially when it comes to the underwater scenes and the sequences that take place at sunset, or the moments with the sailboats when they're sailing on the open ocean. And I really thought the editing by the trifecta of Neil Travis, Steve Potter, and Arthur Schmidt, I thought these editors did an excellent job with this film. I thought there were a lot of moments where the editing really enhanced and just made a lot of the more grand spectacle of the film feel even more epic in the size and scope. I love the way that the opening is edited when the underwater photographers get attacked by the shark, and you have the flash bulbs of the camera that flash on the screen. I thought that was a really inspired editing choice. And there's a lot of moments like that throughout the film, like the water ski sequence with the boat explosion, the shark when it gets electrocuted, the shark when it eats the helicopter, the other shark attacks, when I believe it's Eddie, when he gets eaten by the shark. I thought it was a really well edited and harrowing sequence. And it was just a overall really bang up ship shape job when it comes to the editing. The film has a running time of near 2 hours, but it doesn't really drag that much. I mean, there are some moments where it kind of is a little bit too slow, mainly in the first half, because of a lot of the moments that just feel like they're trying to cover the same ground as the previous film. But once it gets to the teenagers who are adrift in the middle of the ocean with a killer shark, I feel the film is really fast paced and every bit as relentless as the shark itself. And it ends with a electric and really memorable and awesome climax where the shark gets electrocuted and fried to death. So overall, I think Jaws 2 is a fairly underrated sequel. I know that it's gotten more praise over the years, but I don't think that it's talked about enough. And at the end of the day, it's entertaining. I mean, that's what films ultimately are meant to do, is entertain an audience. And I think Jaws 2 is a really entertaining, fun summer blockbuster. And yes, it's definitely veering more into the territory of fantasy with scenes where the shark eats a helicopter. But I think at this point, that's a direction that is warranted. I think it's a good thing, because you know that you're not going to top Jaws when it comes to its realism, or when it comes to its grit, or when it comes to a lot of other things about it. So why not just bring the over-the-top spectacle? And I feel that Jaws 2 is one of those films that definitely does bring the goods when it comes to the over-the-top spectacle of a summer blockbuster. So, yeah, I don't really know what else to say about Jaws 2, except thanks for watching my video, thanks for watching my review, and as always, I'll see you later. See ya.